Yo, what the hell's up? Welcome back to Reviews with Jake, where I just got done watching The House. The House is a new stop-motion animated film on Netflix that is essentially an anthology with 3 parts. 3 different weird-ass stories that all take place within the same house, all of which leaving me saying, what the f was that? This is a curious entry in my catalog for several reasons, one of which being it's a stop-motion animated film, which I've never touched on this channel, probably because no one does it anymore. But I respect the hell out of this medium. I mean, seriously, the time and meticulous detail that it would take to bring this to life. I mean, it is unfathomable. I can't help but think of Ben from Parks and Rec.
That's the whole thing. It's 3 weeks of work.
So when I see someone having the nuts to take on a project with this medium in mind, good on you, not for me. But it's also an anthology, which I've kind of waded in those waters, kind of with The Haunting of Bly Manor, but I did not touch The Haunting of Hill House, so really I just kind of touched one self-contained story. I didn't touch a couple of them all under one roof, so it was a little bit easier to slap a grade on it. This is basically 3 different short films played back to back to back, 3 different sets of characters and scenarios. The only thing that ties them together is the setting, the house. I did not know that was the case when I pushed play on the movie. The Netflix description was a little vague and deceiving. Across different eras, a poor family, an anxious developer, and a fed-up landlady become tied to the same mysterious house in this animated dark comedy. Knowing it's an anthology and reading it now, it makes sense. Now I see it. Now I see the family, the developer, and the landlady, but I did not know that those 3 sets of characters were not going to interact with each other, be completely different stories. Yeah, the across different eras line should have been a clue, but damn, I'm just a few months removed from Spider-Man No Way Home with multiverses and shit. I'm kind of used to cramming all of that under one roof. I mean, what's a couple eras? It's nothing. So it's probably going to be pretty hard to slap one letter grade on 3 completely different films, but let's start with the common denominator. The thing that all 3 of these short films have in common for the pros is the animation. This is a very visually impressive film. I mean, the animation is spectacular. Obviously, that's an adjective I use to describe the animation in movies like Raya and the Last Dragon and Encanto. And yes, that is also spectacular, and so is this, but they're completely different kinds of spectacular. I think the animation style that this film exhibits is perfect for what this movie is. I mean, well, at least I think it is. We'll get into all that later, but I think that it worked here. I don't think that these 3 particular stories would work as a live action film. I don't think that these stories could be the animation style of Pixar, Illumination, or Disney. The stop motion animation just adds an eeriness and a weirdness to the aura of this film. It just works. It almost feels like a Wes Anderson animated film, or even like a throwback Tim Burton film. It's very unique, and it's also really well done. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, the lighting of this film, it has the really moody, spooky, kind of brooding stuff, and it also has really bright lighting and everything in between, just the whole spectrum. And then the use of color. The characters and pieces of these stories are sort of made of like a felt-like fabric. I'm not really sure what it was, but it gave it like this really weird, hairy texture. Even things like a fireplace, you're looking at the flames in there and you can kind of see like little strands of hair kind of going in the flames and the embers. I mean, it was just really cool. It all just gave these 3 different stories a very obscure, strange feeling. It's kind of hard to wrap my finger around it. It was so weird, but I was so interested and zeroed in. It was actually pretty unsettling at times. The very beautiful yet unconventional soundtrack, the very strange, distorted character designs that just were off-putting as all hell, and then just the nightmarish imagination to kind of put all of this together. I was very intrigued with all 3 of these shorts, hook, line, and sinker. I was sitting at the edge of my seat, watching in pure curiosity and confusion, wondering what they were going to show me next. However, my set of cons kind of starts with where my worries were at when I discovered this was essentially 3 different anthology short films. Because it was just that, 3 different stories, and all 3 of these stories were not created equal. The quality of craftsmanship and animation was top shelf across all of them, but the content and the stories not always so consistent. There was one that I absolutely loved. There was one that kind of started slow but finished strong, and then the other one that kind of didn't do much for me. It certainly wasn't bad. I was definitely intrigued and interested. Just compared to the other 2, it didn't hit quite as hard. Kind of on a very similar note, I feel like these 3 different shorts were drastically different in tone. There were definitely some threads and themes that tied them all together thematically, but it just in terms of their approach, sometimes it was very different. It almost felt like three completely different genres. Some moments were downright haunting, other moments were funny, and when these three films are played back to back to back, it was often hard for me to keep the correct mindset while watching when things are changing so much. But one common con that I found across all three stories is kind of one of the things I was worried about with short films, is kind of one of the problems with that medium, and that are the limitations in story and character. And maybe that's just a personal preference. Hell, all of this I guess is a personal preference. That's a review. But I often find that short films are often difficult to wring all of the plot for what they're worth. With such a limited runtime, you can't dive deep into your characters, their backstories. You can't see progressions as much. Everything feels expedited. I personally often find with short films that the characters within them don't really feel too fleshed out. They more so feel like conduits, units of the plot itself. This does feel a little hypocritical saying that, considering I am literally in pre-production for a short film right now and I love making short films, but I acknowledge the limitations of that format. And knowing that limitation, I know that it's going to be difficult for me to use the same grading metric of story and character, those expectations that I find for a short film versus a full feature film. If a full-length 90-minute film had this much of a lack of story and character, I would still call it a con. And just because this movie is much shorter and has more of a reason to not have a story, it's still kind of a con. I would actually be really interested to see full-length versions of all three of these stories, but seeing them in such a short film format, that abbreviated length, was just kind of a bummer. I kind of wanted to dive deeper. So with that, all in all, it's hard for me to put a single grade on three different short films, but I would say this collection was a good time. It's very odd, unique, bizarre. It calls for some deep analysis, which I always love. I think it's worth a watch. I'm going to give The House a B. But that is just me. What do you guys think? Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe to this channel to stay up to date. New reviews coming real soon. Stay safe. Thanks for checking in.